the world of fiction, the terms power fantasy and wish fulfillment get a bad reputation, and fair enough. Here in the world of anime, there are dozens of new self-insert isekai every season. They're inoffensive, but mostly forgotten by the next season. Only a handful of isekai really manage to stand out and be remembered as classics. However, today we're not actually talking about an isekai. It has some similarities, sure, but it's a completely different thing. We're talking about the Korean series Solo Leveling. Solo Leveling was first published as a web novel back in 2016 and exploded in popularity since then, being adapted into a popular manhwa. And right now, it's been announced that it's being adapted into an anime with animation done by A1 Pictures. They're a prolific studio that has animated series from a wide variety of genres. They've done Fairy Tail, Erased, Kaguya-sama, and more. We've even covered and quite enjoyed one of their shows on this channel. What all of these shows have in common is excellent animation, so it seems like beautiful action scenes from this manhwa are going to be done justice. So for those of you who haven't read it yet, you probably are wondering what Solo Leveling is all about. Well, like we said at the start, it's not quite an isekai despite having a lot of tropes from the genre, like having video game-based power systems. It's really more of an urban fantasy, but even then, that's not quite right. Let's explain. The world of Solo Leveling is a lot like our modern one, but the main difference is that small pocket dimensions called dungeons occasionally open up. These dungeons are full of dangerous monsters that spill out into the rest of the world. So in order to combat this, there are groups of people called hunters. These people go into the dungeons and kill the monsters inside in exchange for money and fame. Our main character is Jin-woo. At the start of the series, he's known as the weakest hunter in Korea, if not the world. He basically just tags along with other hunters in low-rank dungeons, hanging back and not doing much. Whenever he does try to help, he usually gets himself hurt. Other hunters have taken him being around as a good sign, since if he's there, it must be a weak dungeon. But one day, something goes horribly wrong. Jin-woo's group find themselves inside a second dungeon hidden inside of a weak dungeon. They're attacked by a bunch of living statues which kill most of the group. In the end, several are able to escape, but Jin-woo is stuck inside and seemingly killed. But as Jin-woo lies there dying, he hears a voice asking him one simple question. Do you want to be a player? And this is where our story really begins. Jin-woo wakes up in the hospital and learns that he has survived. But more importantly than that, he sees what appears to be a video game UI floating in front of him. Nobody else can see it, but this UI gives Jin-woo an incredible advantage. That's right. Solo Leveling is one of those fantasy series that runs on video game logic. It's fairly common in the isekai genre to have a universe behave like a typical RPG. Everything from comedies like Konosuba to more serious works like Shield Hero does it. But in those examples, the RPG logic applies to the whole world. While in Solo Leveling, it seems that this interface is unique to Jin-woo. This interface gives him all sorts of advantages. There's an item shop where he can gain unique weapons and armor, a daily quest log that gives him tasks to get stronger, and most importantly, now he can level up. You see, hunters are assigned a rank when they first join a hunting guild. These ranks go from E all the way up to S. Yeah, like a tier list. But the thing is, hunters tend to stay at the rank they begin at with no real way to increase it. It's an innate talent, something that you're born with. But with Jin-woo's awakening, he's able to level himself up through his daily quest log of exercises and by combat against monsters. With these new abilities, Jin-woo is able to quickly level up and rise through the ranks as a hunter. He matures both physically and emotionally, becoming able to take on much tougher opponents through the use of his new skills. Some critics of Solo Leveling have claimed that Jin-woo is an uninteresting protagonist, and while on the surface he may not seem like much, there's a lot to him. At first glance, he may look like a typical tough guy, but we see that he cares deeply about his family. The reason he became a hunter in the first place was because his mother is in a coma and he has a little sister to look after. In a lot of ways, he's similar to another famous tough guy character, Jotaro Kujo, specifically as he appears in Stardust Crusaders. Both Jin-woo and Jotaro are tough, stoic guys with impossibly strong powers at their disposal, and their main motivation is helping their mom. And of course, they're both willing to get absolutely brutal in combat. Sure, both of them might not be the deepest, but they've got just enough personality to be interesting. And in the case of Solo Leveling, it's mostly just a whole lot of fun to watch him wreck a bunch of enemies. Sometimes having a super complex character isn't necessary as long as they're a lot of fun to watch. And believe us, the art and action in Solo Leveling are great. The art in the manhwa is done excellently with smooth lines and bright colors. Plus, there are some interesting designs to all the various fantasy creatures that Jin-woo encounters. Special mention goes to the creepy smiling statue in the first arc. That thing is terrifying. Speaking of the creatures, the world building in Solo Leveling is genuinely interesting. Most stories wouldn't put too much thought into meshing the real world and fantasy world together, but Solo Leveling occasionally takes its time to explain some of the world's inner workings. It shows us things like how the guild system works, not just in Korea but around the world, and also shows us the consequences of monsters occasionally appearing in our world. For example, one part of the world's backstory involves Jeju Island, a real island off the coast of Korea, being overrun by giant ants thanks to a dungeon not being dealt with in time. There's also one more thing about Jin-woo that makes him an interesting protagonist. This next bit might be a bit of a spoiler, so take caution moving forward. Okay, so after leveling up quite a bit, Jin-woo's UI gives him the chance to change his class. Before, he didn't have one, so this is a major step up for him. He's taken to another pocket dimension where his quest begins. After a long and dangerous test where Jin-woo has to outsmart a large number of enemies, he unlocks his new class. He becomes a highly skilled necromancer. This is a shock to both Jin-woo and the audience, as right before this, he hadn't really been using any magic to fight. And it turns out that Jin-woo isn't just any necromancer either. Using a combination of his intelligence and strength, Jin-woo is able to achieve the highest rank of necromancer, Shadow Lord. With these new powers, Jin-woo has the ability to revive any defeated enemy from the dead and use them as his servant in battle. So not only is Jin-woo insanely strong, he now has the power to essentially summon a small army. All of this makes Jin-woo one of the coolest characters in all of fantasy fiction. And not only that, but his adventures are a whole lot of fun to watch. Of course, even if he is the main focus, it's not just all Jin-woo all the time. The manhwa has a pretty large supporting cast as well. There are Jin-woo's friends from when he was still considered the weakest hunter, the new ones he makes after powering up, his family, and a wide array of antagonists. One of our personal favorite side characters is Yoo Jin-ho. He's a friend of Jin-woo's and basically the perfect foil to him. While Jin-woo's family was never very well off, Jin-ho comes from a rich family. In a typical story, you'd expect someone like Jin-ho to be a stuck-up jerk and a rival to Jin-woo, but he's actually surprisingly a nice guy and quickly befriends Jin-woo. In fact, his more positive personality works off of Jin-woo's more gruff one perfectly. Overall, there's a lot to enjoy when it comes to Solo Leveling. It takes what could be just a typical urban fantasy setting and expands on it in some interesting ways. And with interesting characters and beautiful art, it will keep you hooked. Like we said at the start, it's a bit of a wish fulfillment story, but in the best way possible. Watching Jin-woo go from nobody to hero is an epic journey that's a lot of fun to watch. Solo Leveling is already one of the most well-known manhwa out there, even among the people who don't typically read manhwa. So, the upcoming anime adaptation of Solo Leveling may help it spread to an even wider audience. Whatever the case, it'll be an exciting journey to see it jump from page to the screen. What do you think of Solo Leveling? And are you excited for the anime adaptation?